the numbers, and fortunately I didn't have to do them myself. So a couple of economists from the Brookings Institute did a study to figure out what is the real return on average of higher education, and what are you actually getting for your money. And what they found is that it costs a little over $100,000, and this is, by the way, not just tuition, but also room and board, okay, for 4 years of college. Okay, $100,000, a lot of money. And the question is, if you had $100,000 at age 18, would it make sense to spend that on college, or would you invest it? Maybe you buy a home. Maybe you would invest it in the stock market. And then they actually measured out the average person earned, okay, from spending that money. And they found that the real return on investment, the ROI of that money, was about 15%. And I can tell you, as a financial planner, if I can show you an investment with an average return of 15%, that is the single best investment you can make. There is no better deal out there. Yes, you could get lucky, right? You can start your own company and become a billionaire. You could pick the one stock that goes to the roof. You could get really fortunate in New York real estate. But the reality is, you look at the stock market as a whole, 6.8% average return, not bad. Real estate as a whole, believe it or not, less than 1%, 0.4% over inflation. So the rate of return we see is much higher on education than anything else that you could do with that money. But it gets even better, because this is looking at historical numbers, right? And as a financial planner, I always say past performance is not always future performance. The question is, what is the trend line? Well, the trend line is actually getting better and better for education, believe it or not. In fact, if you look at, as a study that Georgetown did, from 2010 to 2016, they found, and I'm not exaggerating, 99% of all new jobs required a degree of some kind. 99%, okay? Which is a pretty, I'd be really worried, if I'm going to a situation where in the future, without that type of degree. Now, okay, what about going forward? Well, Georgetown also looked and said that they're predicting, based on trends, that next year 63% of jobs will require some type of higher education degree. And the trend lines are only going stronger and stronger than that. If you go back to the 1970s, very few jobs, it's like a third of jobs require higher education. So the trend line is getting better. It means the return on that investment is getting better. Okay. Now the final point I want to make, because I want to address the fact that this is not, it doesn't work out always for everyone. But there are things people can do to make that return on investment better. So who are the people suffering, okay, when it comes to, that are getting kind of a, quote, bad deal from higher education? The single biggest group that's suffering is older students that are usually attending for-profit schools. Okay, they're going a little later in life. To be honest, some of those schools are not good deals for them. They're not taking out huge loans, but they're struggling to pay them back. They're not able to necessarily increase their income. So yes, there's a small percentage of the population affected by that. Let me go to the other extreme. Where are most of the big student loans coming from? Okay, over half of that huge $1 trillion number you heard, believe it or not, over half is actually graduate school debt. A lot of those folks are making very high incomes. In fact, about 25% of the people with these large student loans are making significantly more than they could without them. So yes, no one likes to pay that big, tuition, that student loan bill, but you have to think about what your income would be without it, right? So if you're a physician, an attorney, a corporate executive, with an MBA and whatnot, what would you be making without that degree? You got to think about that too, because we always think about that, the bill that comes to us. So those are kind of the two extremes. But what about the average person? Well, this is not against higher education, but there are choices that you can make, okay, that can dramatically increase the return on that investment. There was a study, for example, done that showed that going to a higher ranked school does not necessarily boost your income. Actually, it shouldn't boost it at all. Over going to a lower ranked school when you control for someone who got into both schools. Okay, so a lot of times maybe a question going to a state school instead of going to a private school, we don't necessarily see a huge increase in income from going to a private school. Starting at a 2-year school, transferring to a 4-year.
Sorry, Eric, I'm about to cut you off. Thank you so much.